Hi guys, and welcome to Thankful Thursday with myself, Kel, and also Rachel. So it feels like forever since I've uploaded a video that I'm actually in. I've been making a lot of slideshows lately, and that's because I hurt my rib a few weeks back, about 5 weeks actually by now. And as dramatic as it sounds, it was quite painful to actually sit and constantly be talking and breathing. I did make a video last week, but as you know, we had some problems with YouTube last week, and it was deleting videos and not uploading videos, and so you weren't able to see the video that I made last week. But anyway, on to this week. The topic that Rachel and I are looking at this week is about whether being overweight or obese is an eating disorder. And I think it's really good that we're actually looking at this question, because I think we've so often focused on sort of the underweight, anorexic end of the scale, and I think that's just from personal experience, because many of us at the channel have had eating disorders that meant we were underweight. Not all of us, but most of us. So I think that's naturally where we end up focusing our attention. But not everybody with an eating disorder is underweight. I think a lot of people forget that. Anorexia is the eating disorder sort of that the least people have, but it's also the one that's more common in newspapers and magazines. It's the one that you hear about the most, and because of that I think people that are overweight because of eating disorders tend to get neglected. For example, when I was at the eating disorders clinic, the eating disorders clinic that I went to did treat, every type of eating disorder, but inpatient was only really for people that were emaciated, and lots of the support really was focused on being underweight, and I think that must be really isolating for people that are overweight or obese. And I imagine it's quite difficult as well to be going to a clinic when there's all sorts of information around about gaining weight, and there's lots of people around that are struggling at the low end of the scale. So is being overweight an eating disorder? Let's get to the actual question. I think it's difficult for me to say yes or no, because it's a very personal question. We are all built differently. I'm quite a petite person. I'm only 5 foot tall, and I have quite a slight bone structure, and therefore I am naturally quite slight. But other people are naturally broader, naturally curvier, and some people are naturally quite a bit heavier, towards the higher end, and even slightly overweight, and that's completely normal for some people. And I think you have to know what's normal for you. What's normal for you if you're eating healthily, exercising a normal amount, where your body would comfortably, naturally sit at. And if you're engaging in behaviours with emotions tied to them, for example, if when you're upset you binge, or if you constantly are overeating when you're bored or anxious, or if you find being at a bigger size comforting. I know I found being underweight sort of a safety thing, so I imagine that some people would find safety in being sort of at the opposite end of the scale. I could understand how that would happen. And so I think that's what you need to look at, and you need to ask yourself if your emotions are tied into your behaviour, because that really is, the staple of an eating disorder. Eating disordered behaviours are not really about weight, and they're not really about food, but we use weight and we use food as a way of expressing our emotion. And if you're at either end of that scale, if you're extremely underweight or extremely overweight, then your body really, really screams that something is wrong. So being obese absolutely can be an eating disorder. I think the problem comes in that in society we seem to have sort of found ourselves in this crisis where lots of people are underweight and lots of people are overweight, and there's actually not so many people in the middle anymore. I'm not really sure why that is. It seems to be that just socially we have lost sight of what normal healthy eating is, and that sort of pushes some people to not eat enough or to want to be very skinny. And it pushes other people to eat larger amounts because they sort of view that as normal. And that isn't an eating disorder, that's just poor education and poor understanding, and sort of, what you consider socially acceptable and normal. that isn't an eating disorder. But if your emotions are tied into it, then absolutely yes, it is an eating disorder. And I think it probably can be difficult for people that are overweight or obese to be taken seriously as having an eating disorder, and I think that that's, really difficult and really unfair, because I do find that when people look at somebody that's very underweight, it can be quite painful to look at somebody that's very underweight, and you can, you sort of want to feed them and make them feel better, which absolutely isn't the answer, but it's kind of a natural instinct for some reason. And I've never seen anybody react like that to somebody that's overweight, to acknowledge that that's a sign that something's wrong. Because if your friend was looking, unusually thin and unhealthy, you would probably ask them if everything was alright and if, you could do anything. But if they gained a little bit of weight, then you're probably not going to ask in the same way whether something is wrong. But there absolutely could be something wrong. So I guess that's kind of, in short, my perception of this, and I wasn't really exactly sure what to cover this week. If you've got any questions, then put them in the box down there. If they pertain to this video, then I'll try and answer them in a comment. But if it's something that we could perhaps answer in a future video, then I think it would be really good for us to be looking at this end of the scale in videos a little bit more, because we absolutely haven't intended to neglect this, but I think we somehow have a little bit. So I'm going to leave that there, guys. I hope you're all well, and I'll be back next week. Bye!